Hello humans, it's just Martine. I think we all have those things that we're like, I don't know about all that. And for me, especially when it comes to book covers, my thing is people on book covers. I don't know why I hate it so much. And it's not even like silhouettes, it's not faces necessarily, it's not parts of people that we see. It's when I see the whole person, usually in like a pose or something. I always think like, I'm not going to enjoy this book. I don't think that's fair because there's not a singular genre that's the only one associated with that type of cover. And also, that's literally the definition of judging a book by its cover. So, in today's episode of Judging a Book by Its Cover, I'm going to read five books that exclusively have whole people on the cover. I'm going to be picking out of a long list. There are hundreds of books in this list of books that I've gotten from Fray from Robin's Reads. If you want to see my video about that, I'll link it in the cards. But for now, let's pick which 5 books I'm going to be reading for this challenge. So here I am scrolling through all these. So we're going to stop when we see like a person. All right, this is a good example right here. There's a whole person on this book. What's this book even about? I have no idea. Ulysses exposed a dark urban fantasy. I haven't read many urban fantasies, but it's only 250 pages. We're going to make this one of the books. Okay. I want the book details for this one because there's not just one person, there's 2 whole people. An urban fantasy. So a lot of these are urban fantasies. So I'm just going to pick from different genres. I'm going to do one urban fantasy. If it turns out that I have mixed feelings about urban fantasy, we can make a whole urban fantasy reading vlog. How about? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there is a singular genre associated with it. This one. Is this one an urban fantasy? I'm really not proving my point here. This is not urban fantasy. If it is, I'll be wildly surprised. Okay, Fake Marriage to Her Best Friend, a Sweet Romance series book 1. It's only 130 pages. Absolutely, there are 2 full people on this, so we're adding it to our list for this video. We scroll down just a little, and boom, we get this book. I think this is just fantasy. If I'm wrong, oh well. A post-apocalyptic thriller. There's a whole person, it's under 300 pages, it's going on the list. Maybe we'll do this, because I was supposed to read this book for Breezy Hollow Readathon, but I didn't get around to it. So the 5 books that I have are Ulysses Exposed, Fake Marriage to Her Best Friend, Fray, Emergence Infection, and Messages. I feel like we've got a good mix of genres, but we've got people on all of these covers. I'll let you know what I start reading first. Right, so I'm 50% of the way into Fake Marriage to Her Best Friend. Not the most creative title I've ever heard. Here's the main problem I'm having with it. Friends to lovers trope is usually a very good trope for me for a couple of reasons. Typically, it implies that people involved really care about each other. It also typically implies that they have some semblance of good enough communication, and communication or miscommunication is typically my biggest problem with all romance books. If you have a trope that is typically attached to better communication, of course, more to like that. The problem is they keep thinking of one another as best friends. They hardly know anything about each other, and they reference how things used to be in their friendship. And I don't know what that means. Like, we aren't actually seeing them being really good friends to one another. We're seeing, like, the main male character be super moody and, like, shut down all the time and then suddenly rush to help. So, first of all, he's not communicating at all. And she's also not communicating. And it's clear that they don't have a solid base of communication in line already because neither one of them know about like the biggest hurts that they've felt pretty recently. And they've been friends for years and years and years. And if they're going to be best friends, they would know about these things. Like, you would know that your best friend's girlfriend or fiance at the time stole his designs and betrayed his trust. Or you know that your best friend, her boyfriend or fiance, left her because of this scandal that was not her fault at all. Like, you'd know those things, especially because he was also good friends with the person who caused the scandal that she ended up in a mess of. So they don't communicate it like at all well. You're in both of their heads at different times, and they get these strong rush of like positive feelings for one another and wanting to be protective, but it's not like a general thing. They go like, they have moments where they just plunge down. He gets mad at so many things, even to the point where like she says something and then in her inner monologue, she says like, with my luck, like that's going to upset him, which is just not good. It's not great so far. It's readable, but like it's taking one of my favorite tropes and taking all the reasons that I typically like that trope and just killing it in the worst way. Like, not killing it as in like smashing it out of the park, but like killing it dead. But at least it's short and I'm 50% of the way through. And yeah, I'm sorry. You can't go from saying the maybe we're not really friends 1 minute to being like, because we all know we're more than just friends. When you've just shut down emotionally, refused to communicate, pushed her away, and said something so damaging and hurtful to her. How dare you? I can't. Oh my God. I was okay with this book before the last chapter I read. Oh, I cannot stand that. No, you don't get to do that. That was the most confusing, emotionally disgusting, uncommunicative scene I've maybe ever read. So frustrated and upset with these characters. They're gonna end up together in the end, and I'm not gonna be happy about it because all they're doing right now is hurting each other over and over and over and over again, because neither one of them has had healthy relationships in the past, but they won't acknowledge it either. And the guy has anger issues. Like, I was afraid in the last scene he was going to hit her. He didn't, but like, had me convinced for a minute. Oh man. A sweet romance. That's the subtitles of this book. A descriptor. A sweet There's been nothing sweet so far. I just finished Fake Marriage to Her Best Friend. I gave it 1.5 out of 5 stars. Their dynamic changed so completely at the end. Didn't like it. Told you all the reasons I was not vibing with it. And first those got worse, and then they disappeared. And there was a scene as if they were resolving conflict, but they didn't really. And it was just weird. And then he had total trust again, even though it would take like real hardcore therapy to get him to trust people the right way again. Anyway, part of the things that I wrote in my review was he needed a therapist. He got a happily ever after. So that's my review. So far, people on the cover, not looking too hot. I just finished Emergence Infection, and I think I'm giving it 2.5 out of 5 stars. It was pretty good. A lot of action sequences, but I kind of predicted that because of the cover. I mean, it had a guy with a gun on the front. I also, like, in the back of my mind, knew this was a series, but I still feel as if there was no real full arc to this book. I see the arc that's connecting it to the rest of the books, right? But I don't feel like this one was like a full story, maybe. And there was an unnecessary love interest while a bunch of people, like so many people, were dying and they were fearing for their lives, and it was like the least appropriate time to be thinking about the fact that you're attracted to someone, frankly. But overall, I thought the concept was really interesting. I think the pathogen that the author described that emerged and infected the world in this book was like really creative and fascinating and scary. It was a zombie story in some ways, but it played with a lot of the dynamics of zombie stories, which I appreciated. Like, they made reference to the fact that like these are not zombies because these are the ways in which they're acting different than the typical zombie that you think of, which is pretty interesting. I liked the organization of the creatures, like those infected had a specific organization system. It made them pretty interesting to read about. So all in all, a pretty good book, but not something that I'd be like recommending to everybody. And especially since I don't like action sequences, like maybe not the best choice for me. Pretty novel concept and interesting to read about, so pretty good. All right, I just finished the third book for this challenge, which was Messages by John Michael Hillman, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars, but I had some pretty serious issues with it that hampered my enjoyment significantly. That's mainly that the discussion about people of Arabic descent and individuals who are Muslim was like, how shall we say, it seemed like the author tried to handle it well, but they didn't, unfortunately. For example, when they were referring to people who were Arabic, who were central to the plot, they would refer to them as, quote, the Arabs. They seemed to equivocate being of Arabic descent and being Muslim. They used those words pretty interchangeably, and although there are lots of Arabic people who are indeed Muslim, not all of them. That also didn't sit well for me because this ended up being Christian fiction, which is fine. Their messages about God was fine. It was a little like shove it down your throat, but whatever. And I wasn't mentally prepared for that because I didn't know it was Christian fiction. But it would have been more fine if you weren't seeing this main character who was getting these messages from God, ostensibly, about how to stop these terrorists, a lot of whom were Muslim. It was so uncomfortable in lots of moments, including this thought that the main character had near the beginning of the book where he was like, I always smile at my Arab neighbor so that he knows that I don't think that all Arabic people are terrorists, which is not a reason you should smile at somebody. I don't know. It just really didn't sit well with me. The only reason it's getting like a 3.5 is because the intrigue of the story was very high. And the reason I can tell you that they definitely tried to handle that representation more correctly, even though I'm going to argue that by making any Arabic Muslim people profiled as terrorists in your book, you're already not doing the right thing. But they tried to handle it better is the fact that one of those Arab characters turned out to be a mole in the terrorist group and helped save the main character. But it was a little, too late of like, oh, yeah, I remember saying this earlier and now I realize that all the Arab characters have been associated with terrorism so far in this book, so I'm just gonna plant this person and be like, haha, no I didn't. I feel like I'm doing so many people such a disservice from the way that I'm talking about this book. I'm trying to express how I feel about it. Like, because of that representation alone, even though it was an intriguing book, I don't recommend it. Don't get that twisted. And I got this book for free. I didn't pay anything for this book, and I'm actively telling you, don't seek this book out. And I wrote a note on my Goodreads review. Usually I just do my 5 things and I move on, but I was like, note, this happened. Didn't love that. But if there's another way that I should handle this situation, feel free to kindly let me know. It was upsetting to read, frankly. Like, I cringed every time. Anyway, this is a very long clip, basically to say I read that book and, oof. But some of the rest of the story was creative, so, like, when it was not those moments, I enjoyed the book, but those moments were enough to hamper my enjoyment of the book and cause a significant red flag to me. So anyway, on to the next book. So I just finished Fray. I'm not quite sure what my thoughts were because, like, overall, I was leaning heavily towards giving it like a 3 stars. I was enjoying it, but it wasn't like my favorite thing ever. But when I sat down to read it, I would like, you know, I was enjoying my time reading it. And then the ending happened and I straight up, like, I'm not sure I could explain to you what happened if I tried. And I even went back and skimmed the last chapter and a half a second time to see if that would help. And I'm not sure it did. The point is that I'm going to give this, I think, 2.5 stars. It had a couple things working against it. In the first place, it's a fantasy novel, and I typically don't read those. And when I do, they're typically not my favorites. It was about elves. Yeah, that's really the only thing that was, like, working against it. A kind of interesting premise. It's about this elf nicknamed Fray, short for, like, Elfrida or something, that means, like, elf directly. She is really, like, behind on learning magic. She feels like she doesn't really have it. I mean, like, she has a little, but she's not very good at controlling it. And then this new elf comes to town named, like, Chevelle or something. He's meeting with the council a lot and she's very intrigued by him, so she starts to try and do research in the library about him. And they keep having these weird, like, tense run-ins. She ends up leaving town, and I totally forget why now, but he goes with her. Well, he doesn't go with her at first. She runs away, and then he finds her, and it turns out that his whole job in the council was to spy on her, basically. So it's a story of her, like, figuring out why that's the case and getting to know him. I think they were headed up north to, like, figure out more of what happened to her mom. In some ways, the journey was successful because she did find out what happened to her mom, but in some ways the journey was not successful because I'm not quite sure where they ended up. I feel like we diverged in some ways from what felt like the original intention of the journey. Nevertheless, some pretty interesting characters. I feel like Ruby was my favorite character, not because I liked her, but just because she was interesting. She was half elf and half fae, so that was intriguing, and her magic was a bit different. Not a special read or anything, but, like, I'm also not upset that I read it. You know, it was that kind of book. Onwards and upwards, I guess. Over the past couple days, I ended up reading Ulysses Exposed, which was my 5th and final book for this Judge a Book by Its Cover video. I ended up giving it 2.5 stars, but not in the way where I was like, ugh, and the rating kept getting lower over the time, but like, it was a fun 2.5 stars. Do you know what I mean by that? Like, it was like I didn't have trouble getting through this book. It was a pretty quick read. There were some specific issues that I had with it. I feel like every chapter ended with this character passing out, not in the way where she had like chronic illness rep or something, but just for various reasons, she would just keep passing out. There was also one specific plot point that came up, and I was like, oh, this is going to be the plot for the rest of the book, because it came like about halfway through or whatever. I was like, cool, this is an interesting concept. And then the next chapter, a secondary character literally said, oh, that'll be easy to fix, and it was fixed, and we moved on. Which is like not how I like my plots to be. Also, the writing style was like not my favorite, and there were just a couple of like editing things here and there that didn't get caught, which happens sometimes. But overall, I really appreciated that it was a dark urban fantasy with very minimal romance. Like, there was definitely a romantic interest in there and some romantic-ish scenes, but in comparison to like what I feel like is a large scope of the urban fantasy genre, this was very light on the romance, and I was so appreciative of that because there was just so much other stuff going on. I didn't want to have to pay attention to like feelings about other people. You know what I mean? Yeah, it was definitely interesting, some twists and turns. If you like urban fantasy and you want a quick, pretty fun one with like some tropes in it and stuff, including amnesia, then, you know, this could be a fun time for you. I thought it was a fun time. It just wasn't exactly my cup of tea, but I really didn't struggle to get through it. I didn't dread reading it or anything, which is always great. Like, you've got to give a book major props for being readable in that sense. So let's go over some final numbers for you. From lowest to highest, I gave 1.5 stars to Fake Marriage to Her Best Friend. For Infection, Emergence, Fray, and Ulysses Exposed, I gave them 2.5 stars, and then Messages got 3.5 stars out of 5. So, what conclusion did I come to? I'm not exactly sure. There was only one of these books that I like actively disliked reading, and that was Fake Marriage to Her Best Friend. And the rest were just like fine, and I'm glad I got to them, and I'm not mad that I read them. Here's the thing, is like sometimes I'll give a book like not a great rating, and the thing is I still enjoyed reading it. I don't know how to describe it. Can I come to a conclusion about people being on the front cover? Not really. That was more of a way of grouping things together, to be honest. So if you believe that, if you have a hypothesis about something that I learned about books with people on the front, then I'd love to hear it in the comments down below. And I'd love to hear in general what you thought of this in the comments down below. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up. Again, comment down below to chat with me. I always respond to your comments. Love talking to you humans, and subscribe for more reading, writing, and college lifestyle content. And until next time, bye humans, bye!